Thank you. Good morning. A couple things I want to talk about, and first I want to come back to something that we've talked about before, and it's more true today in 2018 than it's ever been, and it's that your company, your organizations, they need you, they need your skills, they need the things that your teams are doing more than they ever have. And specifically, if you think of all the possible versions of you, they need absolutely the most ambitious version. And I want to talk about what I mean by that, and I want to tell a story that involves one of you, and I appreciate you allowing me to share that. And I was visiting this company maybe 9 or 10 months ago. And this company had been working with Chef for a couple of years, and what they were going to share with me was after this journey they'd been on, they were actually bringing to production their very first thing with Chef. And I had this dilemma, and there was a dilemma sort of between my heart and my head, and I knew what was expected of me. If someone's showing you a cool thing they're proud of, as the executive from afar, you're supposed to cheerlead and say that's amazing and thank you for sharing. But my head was saying, we got a problem here. And the problem is what we're facing in many organizations, which is if that is the rate that it takes us to bring the first thing, that group is simply going to get left behind by the business. The BUs and the application teams are just going to do their own thing, and they're going to break away and they're going to ignore actually the hard work that this team's doing. So when I say ambitious, what I really mean is together. In many cases, we need to go orders of magnitude faster than we are today. And the backdrop and the reason for that is what's going on in the marketplace. And this chart represents how quickly an organization can add business or customer value over time. And at the steep part of the curve, there's a set of companies that are amazing at this. Investors refer to them as the FAANG companies: Facebook, Apple, Amazon, Netflix, Google. I think Microsoft's earned their way up there. And a whole bunch of other digital native companies that were born in the digital era, and that's all they think about. And for a bunch of reasons, the enterprise is on that flat part of the curve. And you hear this term digital transformation, and it means all sorts of things. To me, what it means is, how do we get our organizations from that flat part of the curve to the steep part of the curve? And there's a bunch of implications of that. And one of them is that we're in this massive shift from IT being sort of centered around infrastructure to being centered around applications. And that has implications for you, the work that you do, and it has implications for us. And we'll be talking about some of those over the next couple of days. And one of the things that's getting in our way, I refer to as the enterprise paradox. And this is something that I want together to help solve. And the enterprise paradox is this. If you go to most enterprises, management is now talking about, practitioners are talking about, there's a set of things that they need to do that are critical to business performance. And these include the world we live in, automation, DevOps, Agile, a bunch of other things. And yet the stark reality in the marketplace, and I'm being a little generous with 15%, I think a very small number of enterprise companies are actually employing known best wide practices across their organization around these very same areas. And this gap is what I refer to as the paradox. And then to make matters worse, depending on what industry you're in, it's the equivalent of sort of 2 minutes to midnight. Time is not our friend. And really our job together is not to spend a lot of time in this place of digital transformation. It's how to get past that, how to get to that steep part of the curve to get post-digital transformation. And I'm going to talk about some things that I think are foundational elements to getting there. But before I do that, I want to recognize the chair that we sit in together, that enterprise IT chair. It's not a very comfortable chair. I hope those chairs are more comfortable. And I think the reason it's not very comfortable is there's this really unreasonable to-do list that contains a lot of meaty items. And so it starts with sort of the obvious that we're all talked about. You must help your organization act like those FAANG companies and be a software-driven, high-velocity development organization. And a lot of you are doing work around that. But then it gets tougher because I've heard this in numerous executives I've talked to. They're being asked, you're being asked, to actually use that work to redefine the culture of your company, to reorient back to innovation. I've heard this so many times. Hey, back 20 years ago when we were founded, or 50 years ago, or 100 years ago, we were an innovation-driven culture, and we've gotten away from that, and we need to get back to that, and we want to use IT as the point end of the spear for that. And that's a pretty heavy thing to put on our shoulders. And then as we ship software, iterate, experiment, measure, optimize, build customer value quickly and often, more value, more customers, more revenue, all the while keeping this business that we've built over, well, Standard Bank told me 150 years in their case yesterday, keeping that running and the thousands of applications that we've built over time for that business. And then a million other things that we have to do in IT. And then the kicker, the insult to all of this is, hey, could you spend less money while you're doing that enormously unreasonable to-do list? And please, please, no matter what, don't let us get hacked. I suspect you've all lived through a version of that to-do list. And as I looked at it, and this was not my intention when I originally put it together, but I realized those things kind of break into something we have talked about in the past, this difference between fast IT and slow IT. And so that top part of the list, that's kind of, fast IT, and that's what web teams and mobile teams and cloud teams and probably a lot of people in here today are doing. But really the bulk of the estate, the bulk of what IT is about is in this other mode. And this is your legacy applications, COTS, commercial off-the-shelf software, I suspect everyone knows that, security, and just all the other stuff. And I want to just say, for you to get your organization to that steep part of the curve, all of it has to be fast. All of it. Nothing can be slow. And really our job, whenever your company was born, is for us to act like digital natives. And the test for someone that's born today is if you're Standard Bank and they didn't know you were a 150-year-old company, you want them not to be able to tell if you were born as an internet company or as an older company. And I want to talk about some industries where this is happening to different degrees. And so let me use Nordstrom. Nordstrom's less than a mile from our office. We've done a lot of work with them over the years. And if you were a customer, and by the way, Nordstrom's not perfect, but I got to say, they're pretty doggone good at what they do. And if you were a customer of theirs, and you were comparing to Gilt, who is a digital native company, it'd be pretty hard to ascertain, which is which. And by the way, a little bit about me, I don't exactly love shopping, and I think I buy clothes about once a year, and it always seems to be the week before ChefConf. So I actually went through this very last week. And as I went through it and I was checking out my bundle, including something that's on me this very instant, I was sort of shocked. And I don't know if you can see that, but there was this option for $15 for this big annual bundle of clothes I get, that it could be at my house the very same day I was buying it. And so if you think of an organization that's being ambitious and is taking the fight and giving it good to those digital natives as hard as they can, this team, Nordstrom, is absolutely doing it. And I love the work that they're doing. And for contrast, I want to talk about the shipping and logistics industry. And while I have a FedEx logo up here, let me just say, I am the biggest fanboy of FedEx. I gave a keynote maybe 15 years ago, and I told the story of this driver that defined the pinnacle of customer success in the physical world. And all of these steps this person went through to get a letter that was maybe a $15 in revenue to the company from the customer to where it was being delivered. But the game has shifted, and it's not just customer success in the physical world, it's also the digital world. And I want to offer to anyone that's in the shipping and logistics business my free management consulting for the next couple of minutes as a consumer and what I think it's going to take to be successful in the consumer shipping business. And part of this is driven by, I have 2 kids, my younger one's in his 4th year of college, and I sort of run the shipping department for the Crist household, and so I've spent a little more time in this than I'd like to. And what I want's pretty simple. First of all, I want something that's like the Lyft app. I want one button to conjure up what I need. And then I sort of want that to be combined with the elegance of Amazon Go. And if you haven't used Amazon Go, it's the store where you just kind of grab things and leave, and they figure out how to charge you. And yes. And their tagline is, no lines, no checkout, just grab and go. And for those shipping companies, I think it should be just drop and go. And I want to be really, really sharp about what I want, because I'm hoping to have an improved relationship with my shipping partner here. And the first thing I want is I don't want to print out a shipping label. I got a whole clever idea on this, so if you're interested, you can contact me. And the reason I don't want a shipping label is because the item in my household that I have the very worst relationship with is my printer. I see I'm not alone in that. And my printer, amazingly, can always tell how important the thing is I need to do and choose that period of time to run out of paper or ink or Wi-Fi. I have this amazing, does anyone use Google Mesh? It's these multiple things. I can stream movies, no problem, anything. But when it goes to printing my shipping label, I don't know why that thing can't get hooked up to my Wi-Fi. And then the second problem is I don't have a scale. So I'm always guessing, is this 3 pounds or 7 pounds? And I have this little anxiety in the back of my head. Am I either paying too much, or worse, am I underpaying and will they throw away my package or not deliver it and won't get there? And I don't know what the deal is on that. And then lastly, I got to go dig up a tape measure and measure this. And what happens is I get an annoyance kind of building in the back of my head. And that annoyance is this whole process got built not to optimize my time and effort, but actually the other side of the partnership's time and effort. And I know there's robots that can scan and weigh and figure that thing all out and bill my credit card, and I don't have to think about that. And as I really started riffing, I started letting my mind run amok. And I remembered watching a commercial during the Olympics, and it was a profile on an athlete that worked for one of those shipping companies. And they were sort of bragging, hey, this is an amazing culture, and they give us the flexibility to be Olympic athletes while we're drivers. And I started to think they were kind of on the vanguard of the gig economy. And they could actually bring that in a way that could define awesomeness for the drivers and for me as a customer and them as a company. And I've kind of been surprised we haven't seen more activity there. And then I just kept running amok thinking about this. And there's a company that I came across from a blog called Life Edited. And they were talking about their experience they had with this thing from a company called August Home. And it's a lock that you can put on your door that replaces half of your deadbolt. And when you just walk up to it, it knows your phone, and it unlocks the door for you, and it's amazing. And I can see, based on the code, if the dog walker, in fact, has picked up my dog and all these things. And I want one of the shipping companies to start buying companies like this and incorporating in there, because let's go back to that Nordstrom example. This big bundle of my annual clothes shipment sits on my porch in Seattle. I'm in an urban environment for half of Seattle to drive by and figure out if they want to go shopping on my porch for free, which has happened a couple of times over the years. And again, with my close timing on ChefConf, that could really mess up my keynote. So if you're in IT at one of those companies that I'm using to represent what we're all going through in most industries, you may be thinking, hey, Barry, this is all well and good. But it turns out I'm not the person that has $300 or $400 million lying around to go buy a company like August Home. And it's not up to me to figure out, are we going to do the gig economy thing, or even your shipping label idea, while clever, it's kind of outside my remit. And I want to say there's a couple things that we need to do for us to get to this place like digital natives. And the first is we need to narrow the separation between the business and IT. If you go to those FAANG companies or those digital natives, those aren't really separate things. And the second one, and this touches on that ambition thing a little bit, is we need to bring our organization the confidence. If they conjure up one of those crazy ideas, if they want to take me up on my free management consulting, that they know that you have the systems and the ability and the velocity to deliver on those things. And in many organizations, that doesn't exist today. And I think it's our job to give the business that confidence. And I want to go back to Amazon as a contrast. And Amazon's in, I can't keep a track. I counted 10 industries when I was doing my dry run. People pointed out a couple industries I had missed. But let me just take healthcare. And what does Amazon know about healthcare? I think they don't know a doggone thing about healthcare. I think they know the same amount as I do. They're an employer, they're pissed off, their bill keeps going up, and they're not very happy with the product their employees are getting. But what Amazon has is this enormous value creation laser. They can point at any problem, and they can learn and fail and just get better and better and better. And if I had to place a bet on someone that could be involved in a meaningful way of disrupting the US healthcare market, I would put my money here as much as anybody. And it's because that confidence that they give their business, that they can execute on those things. And there's three things that I want to talk about as foundational elements. Now, you can't go be Amazon, you can't be Google, you shouldn't even try. But I think you can borrow some things that they do that are very practical and I'm going to argue attainable. And the first I'm going to refer to as effortless infrastructure. And let me say what I don't mean by this. I don't mean that if you're running an infrastructure team that it's no effort to create infrastructure, right? It's definitely effort, right? We live in that. What I mean is, if you're out in the BU in an app team, from your point of view, standing up infrastructure should be absolutely effortless. And when I say effortless, I mean four things: effortless, immediate, scalable, secure. And there's a problem I've seen too often, which is teams are starting to employ automation and Chef and DevOps and so forth. And they'll start to really contrast how they used to do things. And I'll hear, hey, we're 5 times or 10 times or 50 times faster than we used to be at something like setting up a VM. And what I want to argue is, it's back to this ambition thing. That's not enough, sadly, because of the market. And it's more like 1,000 times is what we need to do. In fact, I think the scorecard, if you run an infrastructure team, you got to compare against, is the public cloud scorecard. And you can give your own grades here. We had a good time sort of quibbling over each of these. And I'll say, effortless. By the way, the public cloud is not perfectly effortless. Anyone that's used it knows that. It's pretty awesome, but it's not effortless. So, I don't know. I gave it a 7. Immediate, secure, absolutely. 10 out of 10. Like, nothing's better than that. The most controversial discussion I've had in the last 2 months inside our company is what score to give the public cloud on secure. So I gave a 7, and I put an asterisk on it, and I will tell you the range of answers from our own folks was very wide in this respect. But this is kind of the point of view. You have to compare yourself against that. And if you're below that, that's the gap when you'll just get left behind by the business. The second thing I want to talk about is a pattern that you can bring in. And I'm going to talk about a very specific thing while I have a big thing listed there. And that is that you, of course, have to kick out, you have to kill anything that is getting in the way of velocity. And I want to talk about a very specific thing around that, which is compliance. And you probably know that we've gotten into the compliance automation business, and we've been there for a couple of years. And I'm not sure we actually ever shared the why behind that. And the why actually was a little less of a security reason, and it was a whole lot more about a compliance reason. And we saw again and again and again, the compliance was sort of the problem, and security was the problem many times, and us collectively trying to achieve velocity. And one of you shared this story with me, and this, by the way, is a big organization, sort of a Fortune 20 organization, that is doing amazing things, like well on the way to being on the steep part of the curve. And they've completely exploded all their old patterns and that enterprise gap. They're one of the companies that's getting that out of the way. But the one problem they had, the last problem was when an app team would go to release, it would go to this compliance controls team. And you refer to as different things at different companies. But in this case, the story they told me, that one of you told me, was things would then go get parked for somewhere between a month and at times over a year. And I got to tell you, let's go back to that to-do list, innovation. If you want to kill the innovation of some hot dev team, go take their output and park it in a closet for a year. You'll just kill that innovation right out of your company. And I want to posit, even though it's not intuitive, there's actually this relationship between compliance and innovation. And if you get it right, you can enlist those security teams and those compliance teams to actually help you on your path to drive innovation inside your company at the same time that you're actually getting better at the core job of security and compliance. And I know from talking a lot about compliance that there's almost a fatigue around this topic. There's a lot of tools, a lot of people are talking about it. I think a lot of vendors have concluded the easy button for money is around compliance. And you can simplify the whole problem by just keep moving it left, keep moving it left. That company, that story, the postscript is they've eliminated that last step, and they've eliminated it because they now define compliance as a series of software tests that start with local development of the app teams. So when I write my first line of code, those compliance tests are not a mystery. I can actually test against them. So then when they go to release the application, when it goes through that final series of tests, there's no mystery. They know that it's going to pass the test. That's the reinforcing cycle of how if you do compliance right, you can get enormous gains in velocity and do a better job at it at the same time. So I'd encourage you, let us help here. It's a great place to go focus. And then lastly, and if I went back to any of those FAANG companies, take Amazon, who I used before, across those 10 or 12 industries, and I don't know how many development teams they have, but it's got to be in the tens of thousands. And it's maybe a tiny bit of an exaggeration, but not much. They make software one way across that entire estate, a single way. And the advantage they get is that they can hone that craft, and when they improve something, they improve it across the entire company. And in fact, this is probably where the biggest divide exists between how the FAANG companies and how the enterprise is doing it. And I had a discussion, we had our executive leadership forum yesterday, and someone actually pointed out to me, rightly so, that sort of the opposite is happening in the enterprise right now. We're having this Cambrian explosion of dev tools. And if you have 2,000 different applications, the teams are just all doing their same thing, or their own thing, not in the same way, and you probably have 2,000 different ways that you're building software. And especially when you mix in probably two of the most fearful words that you can hear in IT if you're trying to get to the new way, and I said them earlier, it's legacy and COTS. This is what gets us really constipated in trying to sort out some of the problems. And what I just say is they're actually, and this represents the mess of the enterprise. It's not just the new stuff or doing things in containers or Kubernetes. You got to do it across all of this. But I want to suggest there are abstractions that allow you to do this across that entire estate. And the benefits you can bring to your organization of having a single path. Think about it. If you were Ford and you made every car and every truck different, we would have no Ford here. They have a way that they build their things, and they work at it and perfect it and optimize it. And that's what you need to do for software. That's what we need to do. Thank you. Okay, so let me sort of summarize. Getting our organizations to post-digital transformation, effortless infrastructure, start with compliance to help velocity, and really think about and open your mind to that one way. And we're going to be talking about these things over the next 2 days. And I want to leave you with a couple thoughts, one of which is the future CIO and CEOs. And I agree with Gene Kim, and he, in his book, wrote about this, that with increasing frequency, we're going to see CEOs come through the CIO chair. And I think that is true, and we're seeing evidence of that. But I think the way you get to the CIO chair right now is help your company get to that state of post-digital transformation. And if we do some of these things, whether it's the compliance thing or the one way, I actually think the job of IT gets easier. I think that hard, uncomfortable chair gets a little bit more comfortable, a little bit cozier. And more importantly, those things that you can do actually will change the physics of your business, change the customer physics, the financial physics, change the competitive physics. Literally can change the future of your company. And I think our job together, if nothing else, is together, let's have relentless ambition to go do this. And I mentioned the auto industry. And the auto industry, by the way, if you went back a couple years, talk about being on the flat end of the curve. For a lot of good reasons I understand, but they were mired in that flatness. And I want to suggest that when I look at the work that's going on in these three companies that we've worked with, and you'll be hearing from some of them, that when we come back to ChefConf, and I don't know if it's next year or 3 years or somewhere in between, but I am positive they will be on the steep part of that curve. They will be indistinguishable, if you didn't know, to the digital native. And I want to talk about our own ambition a little bit. And we embarked on this journey a couple years ago thinking about some of those market dynamics that were going on in that shift to an application-centered world. And we made some changes in our own strategy and our own product investments. And we want to be that platform that is the single way for you to build, deploy, manage software, infrastructure, applications. And I just want to be crystal clear on this. I'm not talking about just the new stuff. I mean all of it. Legacy, COTS, those things that drive fear, containers, Kubernetes, all of it. That's what I view our job as. And I want to talk about ambition and stress, because it can be stressful when you embark on that. And I use Nordstrom as an example. I've worked closely enough with Nordstrom over the years to know that, it wasn't all easy. It's messy getting there. Getting to the point where they can add value so quickly that they can somehow get my package to me the same day, that comes at a cost. And Chef has gone through some of our own stress as we reoriented the company around what we think the new world is and where it's going. And I'm pretty sure when we introduced Habitat 2 years ago, first of all, I know the market didn't understand. I know half our own employees didn't understand. And we've had our own stresses getting from that point to where we are today. But I want to thank you. I want to thank the people in this room, our community, our customers, our partners. You've believed in us. You've listened. And now you're starting to drive the very things that we're talking about. And because of that, because of you, this last year in 2018, first of all, it's been a record last 12 months in terms of new customers to Chef. 2018 unequivocally is going to be a record revenue year for us. And we're going to be talking a lot about product things, and I think you'll walk away understanding this is a record year from us in the amount of stuff, the amount of kit that we're shipping. So from the bottom of my heart, I want to thank you. This is because of you. I want to wish you a great ChefConf. I look forward to talking to you, many of you, and have a great next couple days. Thank you so much.